basically, my first perspective, my take on the evaluation process this morning is going to be really focused on the, let's say, on the specifics of the, the bureaucracy behind it. But this is very important for all of you to understand from the beginning, because ultimately there's a structure to it, there is a certain logic in it, and you need to make it work in your favor. Now, let me also give you an introduction as to what kind of, let's say, experience and expertise do I bring in as an evaluator and what other evaluators are bringing in. And this is important so that you understand the frame of mind of the evaluator. So basically, I have been working as a national contact point myself, as Jane and Helen, for the competitiveness and innovation program, which actually now today has been taken up within Horizon 2021 to COSME. I have worked actually with the Commission, with the European Institute for Innovation and Technology. So I've been on the other side of the table and of the fence. I am a consultant in the field, so I also work a lot with the applicants. And still, I do a lot of work with the Commission, even nowadays, as an expert on their behalf or as an evaluator, reviewer, and so on and so forth. Now, what does this mean? It means that generally, evaluators bring different perspectives and understand different perspectives. Some within the same, let's say, individuals, some within the teams. And I will tell you then what kind of teams are being put together. Now, let's really go into the detail now. When you start preparing a proposal, it's really important to keep in mind that although the SME instrument is saying all we need is a business plan from your end, it's not about just taking whatever business plan that you might have prepared in the past and put it in because you heard that the SME instrument is flexible and it's easy and all that. It is important to follow the structure of the templates that are being provided. And it is about the structure because these are going to guide you through what is really important for the Commission, which is the funding provider, the money provider, and to the people that take decision or help the Commission to take decision on its behalf. And following this structure, you will actually go on the lines of the three main criteria for evaluation, which is impact, excellence, and implementation. And the size of those circles that I put there is really aligned with the importance of these criteria. So impact is the most important in this program. And we'll discuss what exactly do we mean, Commission evaluators and so on, by impact. Now, it's also really important to keep in mind that what you submit is what is going to be evaluated. There are not going to be any other inferences made. Evaluators really are not going to start just checking around on your company. So what you put there is what's going to be seen. Also, there are page limits. Now, these page limits are really put there to help you be concise whilst also being comprehensive. But concisiveness is very important. So, you know, like there is a saying, if I would have had more time, I would have written it in a shorter, format, number of pages and so on. So do keep to the page limits because besides the fact that if you are not, you are losing the attention of the evaluator, you are also losing in terms of your ability to comply with requirements. And ultimately, in any kind of environment, in any kind of market, being able to play by the rules is very important. So don't just, ignore those things. Also, the concisiveness I mentioned. I really like to use this kind of, circling of key elements, because ultimately, and as you know, in the EU environment and the EU funding, there's a lot of information. But it's always important to look for the keywords. What really are they saying in those pages and pages of information? Now, the evaluation process and the team. You are seeing today, for example, 3 evaluators here. For the SME instrument, what is happening when the proposal comes in? Actually, it's being allocated to a team of 4 evaluators. These evaluators do not really know each other, and they are working remotely, independently. But they are 4, and typically these teams are done in such a way that they bring together different competencies. So, for example, there would be somebody like me with an experience and an expertise in economics, finance, business, investment, and so on. There would be others that would be with a technical background. There would be others that would be really scientifically and academically relevant to that area. There would be others that would be, for example, from a marketing perspective. Now, why is this important? Because each and every of these evaluators are looking at this proposal from their own lens and giving their own marking independently. So your proposal needs to be able to speak to people with different backgrounds. And in this program, the ultimate mark is the median of the marks of the evaluators. That means not the average, the median, so the very middle point between the lowest and the highest. And that means that if somebody really has a totally, positive, very highly positive or very highly negative opinion, it's going to really shift your ultimate score. So it's important for that proposal to speak to all sort of languages from a business, scientific environment and investor environment. Now, let's look into more detail into these evaluation criteria. How many of you today actually applied already for the SME instrument? If you can just, only 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the majority did not as yet apply. How many started to look into the application process? Some more hands? A bit more. Okay. Now, why am I asking this? Within all the documentation that you see, you will even have a self-assessment form, which is actually going to show you the criteria and the points, the various sort of sub-criteria that are looked into the evaluation process. And this basically, under excellence, is really focusing on how your proposal is really aligned with the topic, for example, security, health, biotech, and so on, and what is happening into that area currently, how, the objectives and how pertinent they are, the approach, the soundness. But when you see the text there, is quite heavy, and it's quite academic. It's not necessarily aligned with an SME instrument thing. And you go into the next one of impact. This is in the self-assessment form that is publicly available to you. And you will see elements in terms of impact that refer actually to how your proposed project would contribute to a European or an international level. We are talking really about business, market, society, what kind of positive elements can it bring. And again, relatively heavy stuff there, competitiveness and growth, integration of new knowledge, and so on. You have another thing on quality and efficiency of implementation. And here it talks about coherence and effectiveness of the work plan, complementarity. It's going to talk about operational capacity of applicants and best value for money. Why am I showing you this? Because ultimately, when you go through the process, and what I want to also show you is that you will receive, once you apply the first time, an evaluation summary report. And that evaluation summary report is actually showing really criteria and sub-criteria within this large area that we evaluators use. And the wording in those, it's much more practical. It's much more in line with the business environment, the commercial aspects, the market aspects. So it's good to understand the general approach, but it's important to really go and really dig deeper and see what the evaluators are really asked to look into. And again, I went and I circled for you the keywords that are relevant for me, for other evaluators, and should be relevant to you. And here there is now more detail, more practicality. When we look at impact, and it's important to keep in mind that impact is the most important. The circle is bigger compared to the others. And actually, it has a weight of 1.5 compared to the others. Here, what's important is the market. That you really present a convincing description of the market. And here, I think Jenny actually gave you such a good insight into how really a successful proposal looks like. You really need to understand the market and its segments. And then you also need to show that you really know what are the targeted users. And be clear that you know what's the difference between users, clients, beneficiaries. They might be different parties. This is like, imagine, for example, in the health environment, the ultimate beneficiary would be the patient. The user might be the doctors and the nurses. The clients would be the hospitals. The ones you need to convince are the procurement departments within those hospitals. There are various players. You need to show to the evaluators that you understand all these differences and who does what and who you need to convince. Then you really need to obviously show that you understand the market, its trends, the size, the potential. And it's not just that you understand it, that it has indeed a significant size, something that would be leading to really potential growth for your company, the company that is asking for public EU funding support. So the return has to be significant, and you need to convince of that. Also, it has to demonstrate alignment between what you've done until now and what you are planning to do for the future. Because if you've been really doing something in a certain area and now you come with a great idea into a totally different line, you need to really justify it. So these are the elements that you need to keep in mind. Initial commercialization plan. Again, what Jenny was mentioning, you need to really show that you have an idea in terms of how you really want to take this to the market. Will you do it yourself? Will you license it out to others? Will you do it in a manufacturing, subcontracting environment? How are you really going to generate revenues and put that on the market? Obviously, it makes a difference if you go for phase 1 and phase 2 in terms of the depth that you go, but you still need to show that you know in what direction roughly you are going, or what options do you have, and from what options you are going to analyze, and so on and so forth. So also, you need to show that you have clear awareness and clear capability to protect your knowledge, to protect your intellectual property. That if you have this idea, this concept, you will be able to exploit it, and not the moment you are on the market, everybody else is going to just reverse engineer. These are all elements that have to do with impact. Under excellence. Now here, under excellence, basically, we really talk about the technical relevance, the scientific relevance of what you are proposing compared to what exists right now. The state of the art. But then the state of the art is a lot of terminology used in the typical R&I programs. Here you really need to show that you know what are the challenges, and they have to be relevant challenges that your solution is going to address. And also the value, the added value, the pluses that you will be bringing, you and this solution will be bringing compared to what exists right now, compared to what the competition is offering right now, compared to what others have in the pipeline. You need to know this, and you need to convince us that you can do it, you know what is happening, and you can do it better than others. This is what an excellent criteria is really looking towards. And there needs to be also consistency between your objectives, your aspirations, and what kind of activities you are proposing. They need to be aligned. If you are, sort of shooting for the stars, you have to have, a rocket. Really, you really have to have a Ferrari that goes for that objective. So your activities have to be aligned. Then it's important also to have a convincing approach. These really are the key elements, the key words: consistency, convincingness, understanding, thoroughness. And also, you need to show that there are opportunities, but you need to show that you are understanding the risk involved and that you are capable to put in place contingency actions and mitigating actions. There is no situation without risk. If you just tell the evaluators everything is going to work fine, I'm sure we are going to do it great, nobody will believe you, and you will be losing it. Implementation. Implementation really has to do with what you as an applicant and you as a proposer of a set of activities are going to really do. How these align, how your competencies, what you've done in the past, your resources in terms of people, in terms of facilities. Your people and your facilities are the ones of your collaborators, the ones in your network, the ones that you can have access to, can deliver that impact. But those are things that you might know them, but you need to put them forward because the evaluators do not know them. So you need to be clear on that. You also need to have not just consistency between, your objectives and the activities that you are proposing, but also realistic timelines. If you really shoot for the moon, allow the time to get there. Be specific in your milestones. Really be practical. I mean, a lot, unfortunately, in the past, the EU projects have been, many times associated with a lot of wording, just promise the moon and the sky and so on. This is a very practical program. This is about businesses. This is about economic growth. Show realism. Show that you know exactly what you're going to do. That's what's convincing. Comprehensiveness is also important, and concisiveness, as I said earlier. That is very relevant. Jenny was saying that they had a very long application. That needs to be trimmed, and you need to trim it without really losing the important things. But that's why it's an iterative process. So you really need to go through it. But you need to understand what we are looking for. Experience. Now, the experience is very important. If you have an excellent idea, if you have a very good scientific team, but you cannot show in your applicant SME that you also have resources, that you have people with experience in the sector of activity in the market that you are proposing, there's a problem. This is not just a research and innovation funding program. This is an innovation to the market, to commercialization support program. So the business and the market expertise is crucial. Now, scoring, weights, and thresholds. Each evaluation criteria and sub-criteria, all those that I mentioned, under the 3 sections, impact, excellence, implementation, all those are different sub-criteria. As evaluators, we are scoring from 0 to 10. Actually, we score from 0 to 100 because you can even give a 9.8 or a 7.6. What does this mean? Small differences of impact that you'll make on evaluators and our impressions of that proposal, how you come across, how the project comes across, makes a big difference. The impact criterion has a weight of 1.5. So the score that you have there will be multiplied with 1.5. There's a whole methodology of how all that scoring is put together. But what is important is to keep in mind that for each and every of these criteria, there is a threshold, and there is also a general one. What exactly does this mean? For a phase 1, you really need to get a 4 out of 5, 80% of the markings for each and every of the criteria. For a phase 2, because it's much more elaborate and it's also, assume that you've gone through a process of learning and so on, there is a bit of more leeway that is given on excellence and implementation, but impact still needs to be at 4. And overall, you have a 13 and 12 threshold. It's 13 and 12 out of 15. Sometimes I heard people saying, we got quite a good result, we got 9. Well, it's 9 out of 15, not 9 out of 10. It makes a difference. Make sure that you know what is the scoring scale. It's impressive sometimes how, some organizations just throw themselves into it. You need to do the homework. Also, ultimately, you will get a score for each of the criteria and sub-criteria up to 5. All that is because our 1 to 100 are put together, prorated, and all that. What is important is that you understand that a very good proposal on all those criteria is evaluated between 3.5 and 4.5 out of 5 points. And 4.5 to 5 is excellent. When you consider the thresholds of 13 and 12, that actually means that to make it, to really get selected, or at least shortlisted, because then there is the issue of funding and how much funding availability there is, you need to be excellent on each and every of the criteria and sub-criteria. So do aim from the beginning for excellence. Don't think that a very good assessment is enough. It's not. And it's a very competitive process. So try to understand this, evaluation approach, how we work, what kind of perspectives we have, and then really and truly, best of luck.
Hello, good morning. This is the kind of introduction that makes a speaker uncomfortable, how to design and create a Ferrari. First of all, thanks to EN UK and Innovate UK for inviting me to give this speech. I have a very short introduction to my presentation. As you heard this morning, the evaluators bring their own background, so there are some kind of biases in the evaluations. So I give you my personal view of the evaluations, and I anticipate my biases. My background is in industrial engineering and IT, so I like technology, and I like to understand how things work. And I had also an entrepreneurial experience, so around 17 years ago, together with 5 friends, we created a software company. And for 10 years, I was one of the shareholders of the company. And when I quit the company, we were 130 employees with offices in 3 countries. And so the second bias is that I know how difficult it is to convince a customer to sign a contract. So in my presentation, I will not give magic rules for winning the proposal. So the title of the presentation is very ambitious. There is no magic or a secret recipe. I will just propose some questions that I invite you to go through after you have drafted the first version of the proposal. When you have completed the first draft of the proposal, try to read it again. We heard this morning several times that it's better to get feedbacks from colleagues or external people. And this is an exercise I invite you to do. Try to answer these questions when you have prepared the first version. So the first very simple question is, what are you going to sell? This is very simple and maybe obvious question, but sometimes it's not clear what the company is going to sell. I give you two negative examples. Proposals describe extensively a technology, but they don't describe how the technology will be exploited. On the other hand, some proposals describe very clearly a business model. They describe the need and they describe how they want to go to the market. So this is perfect from a business perspective, but it's not clear how they are going to solve the problems, how their technology will be better than the existing technologies, how they will solve the problems. So this point should be clear at the very beginning of the proposals, because after reading this introduction, the evaluator will have an idea of what the company is going to propose. So the first question is about the market. We already heard a lot of elements about the market. The point I want to underline is that the market is not something high level, very abstract, far from the company. Some proposals describe the market in terms of very aggregated words, concepts. For example, the market is the e-commerce market, or the market is the software market, and so on. But when I read these proposals, I try to imagine who are going to be the customers, who is going to pay for the product, service, technology, and so on. So for me, the market is companies, single users, we heard hospitals, public administrations. So proposals should be very clear in terms of who is going to purchase something from the SME. And there is an element I want to underline is what I call the 0.1% effect. Many companies describe the market, and then when they try to figure out what will be the impact of the company, they say, my target is to reach 0.1% of the market in a time frame, which sounds like a very conservative assumption, so it should impress the evaluators. But if you try to understand what it means, the 0.1% of the market, it may come out that it's too ambitious. I give you an example. Of course, the example is not exactly the same words of the proposals, because I'm not allowed to give details of the proposals, but it's very similar. A proposal was going to sell a software for micro, very small companies. And their objective was to achieve a 0.1% of the market in 3 years. This sounds conservative and reasonable, but I'm Italian, and if I think of the Italian market, I know that there are 4 million micro companies in Italy. So 0.1% means 4,000 companies. 4,000 companies in 3 years means more than 1,000 companies in 1 year. So you need a very strong and effective commercialization strategy to be able to sell a software to so many companies in 3 years. The second question is, what is the model of innovation proposed? So, I'm coming from a university, so we can discuss a lot about what innovation is. But in very simple terms, I classify innovations in 2 ways. Sustaining innovation or incremental innovation, where the market is already existing. There are already companies, competitors providing some kind of services. Skype was not the first voice over IP software in the market. Disruptive innovation is something completely new. So the market, the demand is not already existing. So why this is important? Because in the proposal, you have to describe how the innovation will match the needs and be very convincing in providing justifications. For example, if the market you are addressing is a is an incremental innovation market, then you should already have details, quantitative data about the market, and it should be clear about how you will replace the existing solutions. Providing a product that has better performances than competitors is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for replacing incumbents. If you are in the disruptive innovation market, so you want to create demand, then you have to be convincing in describing how you will generate the demand. The example in my previous slide was the iPad. When the iPad appeared on the market, there was not a clear business model behind the iPad, but the technology was so cute, so flexible, and so on, that it was capable of generating a demand and creating a market. The third question is, we already heard these concepts, so I will go very quickly, is the description of what the company has already realized. Is it clear in the proposal what is the starting point of the company? In many proposals, it's not clear. The proposals declare a TRL. I start from TRL 6, but they don't describe how they got to TRL 6. It should be clear if the SME starts from a set of components that they want to aggregate, or it's just a concept, or it's a working prototype. Of course, if it's a concept, you are not likely to be eligible for the proposal. You should start from a more developed phase of the business idea. But sometimes proposals are not consistent in terms of what the solution is described and what the TRL claimed is. Some proposals, for instance, declare a TRL 6 under the assumption that they just put together existing components, and this is enough for them to say, okay, I'm just picking these components which are already available in the market, I put them together, and so I claim that my TRL is 6. Then, if I read this description, my question is, if it's really TRL 6, there is no added value in putting the things together. So if you are successful, you will have an issue when you go to the market because other competitors could do the same, and you don't have a sustainable differential. If there is an added value in bringing different existing components together, then you cannot be a TRL 6 because you have not tested the integrated solution. Okay, this is just the comments I have just made, so try to be clear in describing how you get to the definition of TRL 6. You have put the technology together. You can describe the process that starts from the business idea to the first prototype and so on. This is quite convincing in terms of giving the assessor an idea of the point you are starting from. The question number 4 is, who is going to commercialize the solution or innovation? What is the sustainability of the model? We already heard that proposals should be very ambitious, but they should also be sustainable. And remember that in some markets, sustainability can be very difficult. If the innovation, the solution proposed has something to do with the physical world, then being successful at international level means being capable of providing the resources at international level. So there might be some sustainability issues. Even if you work in the IT, in the software, in the online domain, sustainability is an issue. if you become very successful, if you have a hyperscale success, then you need to have resources, IT resources, which are sufficient to support the fast-growing market. Remember that services do not scale. This is taken from a presentation of a colleague which was very effective in describing what sustainability is. So everything that is related to human work is hardly scalable. Everything that is physical is scalable, but to some extent. And digital services can be scalable, but pay attention. And the question number 5 is, does the proposal sufficiently support back the claims? There is an effect, I call it a bombastic effect. There is a tendency in proposals in writing very effective, huge, very important sentences like, my innovation is completely disruptive, there is no competitor in the market, my solution is branded new. So this is very good and very impressive if you support this claim with something that justifies. This is taken from some of the proposals. Our solution is ahead all current competitors, and it was a solution addressing the business intelligence market, which to me sounds something already quite developed. Or we approach a blue ocean market. Blue ocean means something completely new. And it was analytic software for analyzing the customer's behavior. Again, a market which should be quite mature. Or we intend to disrupt the market. IoT, so smart sensors in the energy efficient market. This is really a very mature market. So I'm not saying that these solutions cannot be completely new solutions, but there should be a very sound justification. Metrics are very important, and if metrics are not available, you can describe certifications, awards, audits, the process, everything that demonstrates how you got to this very relevant statement. And the very final question is, describe who you are and give you an idea that you have the resources to implement the project in a successful way. Many proposals describe the company providing only a limited portion of the information. For example, the business idea, or some information about the partners or the founding partners, or some proposals just put a list of CVs. This is unreadable for an evaluator. It's important to give a complete set of information that allows the reader to understand that you have the resources, the skills, the ecosystem of partners to implement what you are going to propose. And that's all. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me, especially to EN UK and Innovate UK, and thank you for coming to this presentation. My background professionally is in finance. I worked 17 years in banking, insurance, fund guarantee, stock and commodities exchange, European finance, and I just finished my PhD in European finance last year. Beginning with December 2014, I was selected as evaluator for the SME instrument, focusing mainly on the financial aspect of the programs. Regarding the financial part of your proposal, it is important to understand that this new program of the European Commission addresses a failure in the financial market, because nowadays, especially after the financial crisis, the private financial market didn't provide the funding expected for the innovation project. So that's why the European Commission came up with this new program, which is addressing really well this innovative project, which are also very highly risky projects. The three phases of the SME instrument, which have been presented by our speakers before, are very well crafted. The first phase, as value, has a fixed sum of 50,000 euro, the grant, which represents 70% of the eligible cost of the first phase project. As you heard earlier, you have to put the money on table and then you will be reimbursed by the European Commission. But there is a facility. The European Commission can provide you with an advance payment, and for the first phase there will be 40% of the grant. However, there is a cost assimilated to this advance payment, which is 5% of the grant. So you have 71,000 euro, the eligible cost of the project, 50,000 euro the grant, 20,000 euro the advance payment, and there will be a cost of 2,500 euro for the advance payment. For the phase 2 grant, which is a little bit more complex, the value of the grant can range from 0.5 million up to 2.5 million, with a co-financing rate of 70% of eligible cost. In exceptional cases and topics, the value can go up to 5 million euro and the funding rate can go up to 100%. Again, here you have the possibility to ask for an advance payment, which can go up to 50% of the grant. And another great facility from the European Commission is that you are not required to provide a guarantee letter from a bank. So here you can have visual graphics of the data. For the first phase, you have a lump sum, the grant of 50,000 euro, for eligible cost of somewhere around 70,000 euro. The maximum grant can go from 2.5 million up to 2.5 million euro on the common topics, and in the exceptional topics you can go up to 5 million euro. For the first phase, the outcome should be a business plan describing your business model. And for phase 2, you should provide a feasibility study and a business model. That's why, from my opinion, it is important to pass through all the phases. The phase 1 outcome will be really useful for having success in phase 2. Regarding the financial viability check, first of all, I do recommend that before applying, which is mandatory otherwise, but try to do it a couple of weeks before to start register on the SME Instrument platform to see if you are eligible as an SME. But for single applicants, for example, you are exempted from the financial viability check. You only have to provide a formal declaration that you can implement the proposal, the project, and that you can provide a co-financing. For phase 1 and 2, if you are coordinator of a group of SMEs, then you have to self-check your financial viability through a tool available on the SME Instrument page. The same for phase 2. For the phase 1, you have an annex in the model agreement. I will give you the link a little bit afterwards. And usually the costs are those that are necessary for implementing such a project. My colleagues described them earlier. And for example, you can have consulting costs, especially for intellectual property rights, market potential assessment, developing an innovation strategy, and also marketing costs if you can integrate them in the work package communication activities. Here is the link for the first phase model grant agreement. So the rule is that the general costs are eligible if they are related to the activities needed for implementing the project. You have eligible cost as direct cost and indirect cost. And those should be related to the implementation of the project. You can have personnel costs, you can have travel, equipment, infrastructure, goods and services that are used and useful for implementing it. Subcontracting, it is an important issue for the SME instrument. The main scope of the program is to help the applicant, the SME, to implement. If it can be done alone, it will be great. But if you do consider to subcontracting that, there are two cases. First, if you have an already known subcontractor, or if you don't have a known subcontractor. If you have a known subcontractor, then you have to provide a clear explanation why you chose him. And this explanation and subcontracting methodology should be clear, transparent, non-discriminatory, and should comply with the best value for money principle. Try to think at European money as your own money, so how you will spend them. Okay. Also, some rules from public procurement might be applied in this case, as European grants are also public money. We talked about the 30% of co-financing that we still need to bring on the table for implementing the project. There is, however, another facility provided by the European Commission. And in some cases, you can bring in-kind payments as complement to the 70% grant. So you can use your equipment, infrastructure, or other assets if you comply with some of these conditions in order or to balance the co-financing cost. So you don't have to include financing cost. You have to demonstrate that these equipments are necessary to implement the action and also comply with the depreciation cost. We still need the co-financing, the 30%, and also I'm not talking about the other non-eligible cost. So it is important, even if you declare that you have the financial capacity to implement, it's important to talk earlier with your financer and to really provide this financing in order to implement smoothly the whole project. Here there are some statistics that I gathered from the first 2 years of the SME instruments, from the data provided by the European Commission. And these are the average amount of the grants provided for each phase. It's clear for the phase 1, it's being a fixed sum, it's 50,000 euro. For phase 2, however, the average sum of the grant was above 1.5 million euro. Again, for the first 2 years of the SME instrument until June 2016, there have been 1,500 first phase SME instrument awards. And for phase 2, we had 429 SME instrument award with an average value of 1,600,000 euro. I also made and presented the Innofin Small and Medium Enterprise Guarantee Loans Portfolio, which is a financial instrument provided by the European Union through European investment funds. Basically, financial institutions, also from UK, can provide loans in more accessible conditions to innovative projects. And here the average sum of the loan was almost 500,000 euro. And we can see that somehow they can complement with phase 2. So it might be a good solution for your co-financing needs. About the success rate, these are some statistics that have been interpreted by me from the SME instrument data and from the European Business Angels network. From the 100% of application in the SME instrument, almost 30% passes the threshold. Because of the restricted budget, only 7% have been funded. It's quite similar with business angel investment, where we have slightly the same data. But coming back, the 30% that passes the threshold, we can see that only a third part of them have been funded. The European Commission provides to every SME instrument that passes the threshold the seal of excellence in order to certify that this is an innovative project and in order to try and help the SME attract additional funds from maybe regional or national agencies or other financial institutions. So the seal of excellence is considered by the European investment funds a certification of your innovation capacity, and it is a potential beneficiary for the Innofin SME guarantee loans, the product that I just presented a little bit earlier. In UK, the innovative loans are provided by two banks until now. It is Santander and Barclays, who both banks signed an agreement with the European investment funds in order to provide this kind of loans. Here are some tips for regarding the financial aspect of your application. First one of them, because if you can see here, the SME should be innovative, and grow internationally. That means that in a short period of time, you have to acquire a large share of markets. So it should be presented and a really accelerated growth. And in order to sustain this growth, you have to provide with clear explanation, clear calculations, and also references to official statistics validated by your own research. Also, we can say about the SME instrument that is a risk finance tool, so it is important to present the risk associated with your project, but also try to present what are the mitigating solutions that you come with. And that's all for this time. And good luck to all of you. Thank you.